Today was day 16 of testimony in the Sean Diddy Combs trial, and boy, did it get interesting when Brianna Bongalan took the stand and testified. Now, Bongalan, who goes by Bana, is yet another friend of Cassie Ventura's, and on direct, she told the jury that Combs dangled her over a 17th floor balcony after a rough, drug-fueled night of partying. But that testimony is quickly unraveling on cross-examination. I'm Sara Azari, criminal trial attorney, and this is a special episode of Serving Justice, where we're taking a deep dive into daily testimony in the trial against music mogul Sean Diddy Combs. Let's bring in NewsNation reporter Safia Samee, who is following the trial very closely, and also NewsNation field reporter Tommy Christaldi, who was inside the Manhattan courtroom seeing all of the fireworks today, and to be continued tomorrow. So let me start with Safia first. Where do you see Bongalan's testimony playing into the prosecution's overall case against Combs?
I think the intent here was to go into more of the RICO, right? The racketeering and the corruption. They're trying to show that he is using threats and violence and intimidation and abuse basically to do his bidding and basically to operate his criminal enterprise, kind of like a mob boss, which is essentially what they're trying to prove with RICO. And more than that, I think we talked about this yesterday, Sarah, they're using it to move away from the domestic violence, right? The defense is very firm on their narrative that this is nothing more than domestic violence. And I think with this witness, they're proving that the same kind of abuse and violence was being used against somebody who was not his romantic partner.
Well, and look, I want both of your takes on this, but specifically Tommy, who was there. The defense was trying, to me, I thought they were going there with a line of questioning about hooking up with Cassie. That's an interesting term that they used.
I noticed that.
I was wondering if you guys felt the same way, first of all, but to me it was, were they trying to get out there to this jury that Cassie is sort of this promiscuous, she signed up for this type of lifestyle, and the freak-offs of going with girls, being with Combs, being with Cuddy, that was just not only not coercive, but consensual, but also the idea that that she is sort of this promiscuous into this sort of alternative lifestyle sexual activities. I mean, was that what were the jurors' response, Tommy, to this line of questioning?
I don't know that I noticed anything in the jury particularly through that line of questioning, but I do agree with you. It wasn't just hooking up with Cassie. It was, did you and Cassie get back together? There were a lot of terms that really evoked this idea of a relationship, and whether that was meant to be romantic or sexual or otherwise was kind of left up in the air. It hasn't been followed up on yet. I don't know if that's going to be the grand finale to cross-examination or what necessarily they're going for there.
I just want to say this, having done a number of these trials, often you can't get into an accuser, a victim's sexual past. Even though it might be very relevant, you can't go there. So there might be that that the judge has actually told the defense, you can't go there. But I think it's very clever that they're using words like that, because it's definitely suggestive. And the other thing, before I go back to Safia, Tommy, I wanted to ask you is about the drug use, because, there's been a lot of testimony about Cassie using drugs, Sean Combs cutting off her source of drugs. And now we're learning that Bana was her drug dealer too.
Yes. We heard lots about a lot of different drugs today. Bana herself says that she's sober now, she's clean now, but for a while she was supplying Cassie with a variety of drugs. I don't know that the drug use is what stood out so much to the jury, as much as perhaps the consequence of that drug use, in that I cannot count how many times during her cross-examination today, Bana said, I don't remember. You and I talked the other day after Mia's testimony, and you didn't seem to believe her. I found her more convincing. I feel as though we are probably on the same page today, and that I would not say that Bana is lying. I don't feel comfortable making that claim. But what I will say is that she was remarkably inconsistent. Mm-hmm. She answered questions differently hours apart. Something she said on the direct didn't hold up on the cross-examination. And the amount of time she said, I don't remember, I think that one did get to the jury. There were times.
And Safia, look,
That was brutal.
it doesn't matter whether you don't remember because you're drugged out or you don't remember because you're not telling the truth. At bottom, you're discredited, right?
Yeah. I mean, unfortunately, when you're talking about drug use and the amount of drug use that they highlighted with this witness, the jury, number one, thinks, okay, does this person even remember properly? Because were they high? Were they not, lucid at the time? And so that right there, that's a strike. And then number two, it doesn't look great in terms of credibility when you seem like you were just doing drugs all the time, in terms of just, can you be believed? And so I think those two things are going to be very, very tough to be able to convince a jury out of.
That you should believe her testimony. And I think
Right.
there was also testimony on cross about essentially, even though she said she had a different source of income, but that she did make money from drugs. Cassie would pay her to bring the drugs. So, she's essentially the defense is showing the jury that she's a drug dealer. Do you really believe a drug dealer? That's going to be the argument.
Yeah.
Yeah. I made some notes from what I followed, and I think Tommy's observations were very helpful. We've heard different, including Mia. Mia met with the government 27 times, right? We've heard different people, Don Richard, Mia, keep changing their stories. And Mia is not suing Combs. I guess got $400,000 at the time when she was severed from her employment. But Richard is, and Bonga is. Bonga is suing for $10 million. So I think that was interesting to me because it definitely supports the cash grab theme that the defense is going for. And that each time she made the statement, aside from what Tommy's saying about the I can't remember discreditation, I think there's this idea of her story keeps changing. There's not two times where her story is the same. So I think this witness is done. And for those of you out there who ever wondered what Nicole Westmoreland's role is on the defense team, it's to eviscerate witnesses. Okay.
When she got up there was one of the jurors I noticed who visibly started smiling and nodding and was excited to see what she was going to do. I myself wasn't in court when Don Richard was cross-examined, but I heard it was similarly brutal. So I think the jury knew what to expect with this, and they were anticipating that, especially in comparison to the witness we heard this morning. But I know we'll get into that later.
Yeah,
the thing that I wanted to touch on was specifically the thing that caught me about the way that Bonga's story kept changing was that it wasn't building off of itself. This wasn't a case of, I feel more comfortable with you now and I'm sharing more information, so much as it was a case of, I don't know what I remember or don't remember, and I'm not sure what happened, and this might have happened or that might have happened. We talk about Mia met with the government so many times, and each time she added detail, or so it came out,
Yeah.
And
I've said this before. I don't think you were with us, Tommy, when we were having this conversation, but Safia was, when a story gets more elaborate or the material facts change, not just one or two little things, but that the material facts are completely different, or that the person remembers more with the passage of time, it's really indicative that it's probably not the truth. And so even if someone like you gives them the benefit of the doubt, I think it's going to be very easy for the defense to argue that you cannot believe this person. And one thing I think it's interesting for our viewers to know is that we hear objection so many times. We heard it today when the line of questioning was starting to go somewhere with the defense. But it really doesn't matter. Sometimes we know we're not even supposed to ask it, but we get it out there because it's a bell that you can't unring, and the jury's already heard it. So all that stuff about hooking up and getting back together again and stuff, those are inappropriate areas of questioning about her maybe sexual relationship, maybe with another woman or the witness, but that they've heard it. Like, we're sitting here thinking, the jurors are thinking, Were
Right.
they two okay? Like, were they? What was happening? You know?
So, Sarah, I have to ask you, like,
Yeah.
the prosecutors obviously interviewed her many, many times.
Yeah.
And they still put her on the stand. I mean, do you think they thought the value of what she was going to say would outweigh the credibility, the
I
holes
agree
in
with
all the
you.
credibility? Like, why? I'm just imagining, like, what would
I agree with you.
motivate them?
And to me, I think, do they really not have enough of that corrupt part of the RICO statute that this is the best they got? Because today was the first time, like you said, where I heard somebody who was not in a sexual relationship with Combs, who was attacked, knives and groping and, being dangled over a balcony. And I'm going, oh, okay, now we're getting there, right? But then she gets eviscerated, right? And the whole thing is going to get, I mean, I think the defense is going to be successful in arguing that you cannot believe a word that she's saying. She doesn't remember. She was using drugs. She's just not a credible witness. And so that, to your point, Safia, is like, are you that desperate that this is, because if you had what you needed, right? This is just my opinion. If you have what you need, you don't just put any trash witness on the stand. I'm not calling her trash, but like the quality of her testimony, you go, wait a second, she's not that great. Now her whole case is going to get discredited. That's where you have to kind of use strategy. And to me, I'm wondering whether this is kind of like one of their top people on the corruption of the enterprise.
I think it was the balcony. Well, not that I'm thinking more about it. I think they just needed to corroborate the balcony, because Cassie talked about the balcony incident. So if you don't believe anything that came out of her mouth, I think that jurors still may believe that this balcony incident actually happened, because perhaps
something
Cassie
happened.
Something happened. Cassie talked
but
about
again,
it.
But also remember, they're friends.
Well,
they're friends. They just spoke, like, I don't know, was it yesterday or today or whatever? They spoke about each other, and her coming to court to testify. That came out on cross too.
There's photos of bruises, though. There's photos of bruises that.
I understand. I'm just saying that. Yeah, I'm just saying that in terms of the elaboration, the change in the story, all that. You can't say that there's absolutely no collusion either. Yes, there's corroboration by way of injuries. I don't think the defense is at all going to deny that there was abuse of Cassie, right? But I think the idea is that this was a party girl. They were nice to her on cross-examination because she was a victim of, not of racketeering and sex trafficking, but a victim of abuse, right? So I think that was good. They didn't go there with her too hard. But at the end of the day, when it comes time for argument, I think they've reserved the brutality for there to say, look, here's why, Cassie, it was money. It was consent. She was not trafficked. She was willing. She wanted the free coughs. She wanted, the drugs. I mean, they're going to really smear her, I think, because the case has been built around her.
I thought that it was really interesting that Westmoreland really tried to never said outright, but implied that this story was entirely fabricated, because we did see the bruises. And in fact, the one time that I noticed Sean Combs himself paying the most attention was when we saw a photo of the bruises with metadata attached, where it was taken, when it was taken. He leaned into his chair. He was looking at it very intently. But meanwhile, we are hearing Westmoreland say, so as Cassie told the story, this happened at a hotel, but you said, no, wait, your old apartment had a balcony. Why don't we say that it happened there? And there were, of course, a variety of objections to the way that she was phrasing these questions. But again, you can't unring that bell. And that stood out to me, was she didn't have to say directly, you made this up, because
she suggested it.
She suggested they had to agree on where it happened, which you wouldn't need to do if it was the truth.
If it was the truth.
At one point, she said that Bonna told Cassie she was present for this event. And Bonna said, no, I didn't. She just was there. But again, I think something happened on that balcony. I think that it's unfortunately pretty difficult to figure out what that is when the witness herself is saying at one point, he dangled me over, he pulled me back. At one point it's, I've been standing on the railing the whole time. I was afraid I'd slip. And this was all within the span of a few hours.
Yeah.
So I found that unfortunate for the prosecution's case. I'll say that.
Wow.
There's also the immunity, right, Sarah? Like she's got immunity from prosecutors. And I think at one point, Tommy, let me know, correct me if I'm wrong. Defense asked her who gets to decide whether or not you're telling the truth, because obviously that immunity falls through if you lie.
Right.
And
If you
she
lie,
said,
right.
and they said, who gets to decide? And she said, prosecutors. So it's like another.
Well, that is the number one question when someone's given immunity or they're cooperating, right? Because it's like they have given you a gift, right? They've given you a gift, and there's consequences if they take that away, right? And so that's where they can argue later that this person's given immunity. They were a drug dealer. They were part of all of these activities. And as you see, they're not credible. They keep changing their story and they can't remember, and they were doing drugs. And so, I mean, I understand why she was seeking immunity, obviously, but I think that the idea that the prosecution has control over what she says is critical. I mean, that's, she is, the defense is always going to say, this witness is the puppet of the prosecution. She said these things because she thinks that's what's expected of her, so that she's not charged. I mean,
she also didn't want to be there, right, Tommy? Like you could tell, like she didn't want to be there, right?
Well, so I thought that was interesting because when she walked in this morning, she looked angry. She was not pleased. This was when she came in to accept immunity. She looked annoyed. And
is she the one that was not, they couldn't find, or they couldn't find her lawyer? Is she the one?
I don't think so. I'm not
That's one of
100%.
the victims.
I think that was a different victim, but
Okay.
she seemed annoyed, which I found somewhat confusing because then we heard about this lawsuit that she herself was making. So she's made these claims before. Theoretically, it shouldn't have been that hard to get on the stand. I mean,
Well, by the way,
hard emotionally, hard psychologically, but not necessarily a difficulty for her to get up there and to testify. And then,
well, but see that's exactly right, because she made a demand. She also filed a lawsuit. The stories were different in those documents as well. And so she's pissed off about coming to court on a subpoena, because if she was telling the truth, then she would just repeat the truth. But every single time, and then she blamed her lawyer. She said, I fired him because he shouldn't have said this and that in the demand letter or whatever it was. And so this is a mess. This witness is a mess. And Safia had a great point, because I think if they really had others to make their case, they should have just nixed her, and this is after 5 times or so that she met with the government, and this is what she's delivering. Come on. All right, let's go to the digital video expert that testified, again, showing the jury the video from the hotel assault in 2016. What sort of was the significance of that, Tommy?
So I think the point of his testimony was to prove that the video was not manipulated, or when it was manipulated, he fixed it such that when the court saw it and when the jury saw it, it was as close to an accurate portrayal of reality as it possibly could have been. There was just one problem with his testimony, I think, which was that it was really getting into the nitty-gritty, and frankly, it was boring. There were multiple times I looked at the jury and they were yawning, and the thing that stood out to me was that when the defense got a chance to cross-examine him, they went frame by frame through this video. And the video, he put together a timeline of all of the different camera angles, the cell phone footage, when the security cameras cut out, each different angle of the hallway. It was 11 minutes and 53 seconds long, and we went through almost all of it frame by frame. There were portions we'd skip a chunk of seconds. It took a long time. The jury did not seem engaged, but this was, I thought, confusing. Why would the defense want to keep showing this video? It is harmful to their client. And I know that this isn't a domestic abuse case, so that's not really what's being litigated here, but still, it doesn't paint him in a good light. And we spent a lot of time where that was the thing on the screen today.
It's interesting because you weren't with us yesterday when we were having this conversation, but I said the same thing. I'm like, leave that alone. They've seen this video enough times that unless you absolutely, there's some big issue that would keep the video from being considered in deliberation, I wouldn't go there because they're going to be showing the video now on like slow motion, right?
And
But here's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking it might go to an argument that the defense has or an issue that they've made out of this video, that they might say that the prosecution is overreaching. They have overcharged him. He has not committed racketeering and sex trafficking as charged. He has been a bad guy. He's been a violent guy. He's been a domestic abuser, all of these things, an absolute pig, but not guilty as charged. And so to that point, they can say they are so desperate that they go and put this ridiculous witness who has no credibility on the stand, and the other one, whatever, whoever they are, right? Like Don Richard and all that. And they have to like alter the video to be able to make their case. I mean, I could see them going there. And they probably made an issue, which was forcing the prosecution's hand to bring in this guy to make a record. And
I don't think that they really executed if that was their goal, especially because so much of the cross-examination was spent on the time codes in the little top corner of the video. And while I'm not a forensic video expert myself, I'm pretty sure that can be explained away and was explained away as simple as, you look at if the clock in your house is wrong, and if you see the clock on your microwave says it's 7:03 and the clock on your computer says it's 7:04, those don't exist in two different times. The time was just wrong. And so I thought it was really strange that so much time was spent on the time codes when the time codes don't matter at all. And that was one of the first things covered in the direct examination. So I think that it wasn't just, they weren't undermining this guy's credibility. He's an expert witness. He testified to all of the training that he's done and this and that. And he went through, and at some points I thought it was even interesting. He was kind of controlling the line of questioning to the point where the judge had to reprimand him a little bit and say, hold on, you're the one being asked the questions. You don't get to give the instructions. He was saying, go back a couple frames. I want to see this again. I want to see that again. And again, I just don't think that the jury was particularly engaged with it, which might end up being a good thing because, again, it in question was this video that they've seen over and over that shows Sean Combs beating his girlfriend.
This is something.
Listen, this video is ingrained in their brain. This video is never, you know what I mean? I don't care what timestamp is on it. It's ingrained in their brain, unfortunately for Diddy. But go ahead, Safia.
I was just going to say, they keep drumming on this video. And like, I don't understand it. Like, it's not, they're not going to prove that this video was fake. It's just not going to happen. Yet and I feel like that's where defense is just sort of caught in this loop where they just need to step out of it and move on. But they just keep hammering on this video, and it's not serving any purpose except for like exactly what Tommy said. Like, you're just showing it to them a bunch more times so that it keeps getting in their brain. And I'd be curious if they continue on the same path and continue on the same line where they're like, let's go after the video. Let's go after the video. I think they need to let it go, let that mouse go, and keep it moving.
I agree. And I also think this trial there's been some days where it's just sort of more of the same, but all of a sudden comes in a witness and we all wake up and go, oh, and it's not been that. Sometimes you have trials where there's a lot of forensics and you get experts and it can get really boring. This is not one of those trials. This is this is one of those trials where we've got witnesses talking about really salacious things, bad things mostly, but I think it keeps everybody awake. Bottom line, there is a hell of a lot this witness allegedly does not remember. And I think she's going to be completely discredited. And let's not forget, she has a pending lawsuit against Sean Diddy Combs for $10 million. And that goes directly to this defense theme of cash grabs, right, against Combs. And also, in case you ever wondered what Nicole Westmoreland's role is on the defense team, it is to eviscerate credibility. A couple of weeks back, it started with Don Richard, and today we saw it with this witness, Bonga. Bonga's cross-examination continues tomorrow morning, and it is a must follow. And of course, we're going to be back unpacking it all for you. Thank you, Safia and Tommy, for another insightful conversation. And thank you, our viewers, for tuning in and staying with us. And please stay with NewsNation for the latest on the Sean Diddy Combs trial. We'll be back with you tomorrow. Thank you.